So, we were talking about podcasts actually earlier. People saying, I do not go grocery shopping without a podcast in my ear. Well, I've got a good one for you right now. I'm sure you've seen the show before, Comic Book Syndicate. I was actually on a podcast. I was invited to be on a podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. It was all about Spider-Man. We discussed one of the Spider-Man films, and I was joined by a roster of amazing people who know their stuff. I felt intimidated. I'm like, I'm going to be the guy who knows nothing on this thing. I watched the film, so I'm kind of up to date on that. But it was so much fun, and I cannot wait to listen to it. The episode comes out today, and joining us in the studio to talk a bit about Comic Book Syndicate, comicbooksyndicate.com. The podcast was Here Comes the Spider-Cast. I'm joined by two of the podcasters, I guess that's the proper term, from Here Comes the Spider-Cast. Michael Poirier, otherwise known as Mike L., and Joshua Murr, otherwise known as Joshua Mervell. Josh and Mike, hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for. So how did you get into doing this? You've been doing this a long time, Comic Book Syndicate.
So yeah, the Comic Book Syndicate was a TV show we did on Kojiko for about 14 years, and then about 3 years ago we transitioned into podcasts. And to be honest, it's because there's a lot of post-production that goes into TV.
Oh, yeah.
And it was taking me like sometimes 2 weeks to edit just one episode, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with podcasting, it's strictly audio. And so I'd only known Josh because he was a student at St. Clair College, an animation graduate, right? And we kind of just spontaneously went, okay, let's do a podcast. What do you want to do? Do you want to do Superman, X-Men, Batman, or Spider-Man? And he picked Spider-Man, and it just went from there.
Wow, so that's Here Comes the Spideycast.
Yeah.
Spider-Cast. So, so how, you were a student and you met Mike there at the St. Clair College?
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because I had also watched the Comic Book Syndicate growing up with my dad, and that's also how I got into comics. So meeting Mike, it was almost like meeting like a mini local celebrity at the time.
Truly, though. Mike's shaking his head, but it's so true.
And then we kind of became close because I had done a couple of things while a student in the animation program for the Syndicate, and then years later, we kind of bumped into each other at the movie theater of all places. And Mike graciously invited me on for a movie review for a movie that had been
Spider-Man, funny enough.
Yeah, which was one of the new Spider-Man movies. Yeah. And it kind of just rolled from there that you recruited me to help out with some stuff. And then I think we were both kind of talking about podcasts at the same time.
Right.
And then we were like, well, let's just start it.
Yep.
And how long ago would that have been?
That would have been 2.5 years ago. So the summer before COVID.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yes.
So how many episodes of Here Comes the Spider-Cast are out there?
So your episode is number 175.
Nice.
Now, funny enough, 176 is the last episode. And it had nothing to do with your appearance. There was no criticisms there. But what it is we've come to the natural end because we're only reviewing 80s Spider-Man.
Okay.
And so we got to the end of the 80s, and so that was the natural end. And now we're going to actually be launching two new podcasts. One about old superhero movies and one about, three actually.
Three, yeah.
One about graphic novels in general and one about old DC superheroes.
Really? So 3 different podcasts?
Yes.
And is it going to be, who all, you both were involved in it, and who else do you have on the podcast?
We also have, as always, G.I. Jolie is still going to be one of our co-hosts, and also Bex Luthor.
Bex Luthor is who I did the Spider-Man podcast with.
Yes.
So how did you find her and the other two?
So Jolie was somebody who I just met through the art scene in Windsor, who got involved with the show very early on, maybe in 2007. She just transitioned to being on the crew, then a cast member. Becca is somebody who, again, it sounds weird to say, but she grew up on the show. Like she started watching when she was 12 or 13, and then maybe when she was 19 and she started going to bars, she kind of just ran into me, and she was a cosplayer, right? I met her at a comic convention. She was dressed up as Catwoman, I think, and it kind of just went from there.
Oh, cool.
And, again, you know those memes you see of guys bugging girls in a bar about their knowledge and the girls kind of rolling their eyes. It's the opposite. Becca would be talking to me about Captain America and Spider-Man and stuff. And so we were just like a match made in heaven as far as like working together. And so she joined the crew. And then again, once we started the podcast, she kind of just naturally joined that cast as well.
Right. And Josh, that has to be cool for you. You said you grew up watching the show.
Yeah.
And did you ever think you'd end up being part of this?
No, of course not.
Too cool.
Yeah. It's I remember watching it later at night with my dad. We would stay up and read. And then a lot of the stuff that they were talking about on the podcast, he would pull out his long boxes and we'd sift through his comics and see which ones they were talking about, and we would read them.
Oh, so your dad was into comics too?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
That's
great.
That's why I'm also like a big Spidey guy.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these comics that I we were reading on the podcast were comics that he was collecting as a kid. So he still has all of these. So
what kind of research do you do? Like, we did this one of the Spider-Man's movies with Tobey Maguire and whatnot.
Right, yeah.
Like, what kind of research do you do when you're like, hey, we're going to review this? Do you just kind of review it and ad-lib it, or how deep do you go when you're going to do a topic?
Well, maybe we shouldn't reveal this, but there's not much research done.
No.
I personally have like thousands of magazines that I've read over the years that I'm decent at retaining information, but to be honest, there's not much preparation when we do an episode.
No, we also try and keep it less of like a history lesson and more of just friends hanging out, reading comics together, and then talking about it. So that's kind of the vibe that we want to go for.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm glad that too, because when I listen, and even when we did our show, it wasn't let's recap the whole synopsis of it, because you can watch the movie. It was understand like everyone has seen the movie. Now let's just talk about what we liked and what we didn't like.
Right.
And on the presumption that everyone has seen the movie for the most part, rather than and then this happens. It's like, okay, you can watch the movie to figure that out. Yeah.
Right.
So the new podcast, different direction. Like, what kind of topics can we be talking about?
So one of them we'll be launching. We'll be focusing on old, like pre-2000 superhero TV shows and movies. So we'll be starting with The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves, then going to Adam West Batman, and then eventually going to the Christopher Reeve Superman, and then we're going to get into like Michael Keaton Batman, and then into some weird 90s stuff that I'm sure you remember, like Barbed Wire and Tank Girl and
Tank Girl's one of my Lori Petty, love that.
Yeah, like The Shadow. What else? The Phantom.
Fantastic Four too. Like some weird movies that were made in the 80s and 90s that nobody's ever really heard or seen of, just because they needed to like keep the rights to the movies. So they just made a kind of a crummy movie and put it out there just to say that they did it.
Right. And there was before X-Men ever made it to the big screen, there was a Generation X TV movie that had Banshee and Emma Frost and Jubilee, and no one remembers this.
Wow,
thing.
I don't think I saw that one. Wow,
it only aired once, I think. So we're looking very forward to reviewing that. It's going to be a good one. So maybe we'll have you on for that one.
I would gladly be on something like that. Yeah. It's good. Do you invite members on often as guest appearances?
Almost every week.
Yeah,
we try to.
We try to. Yeah,
we try to mix it up. We try to find podcasters from different cities. Sometimes, like we've had people on from Pennsylvania, from Kansas, from like California.
Yeah, and then one of the gentlemen we had on, he also had a podcast, and we kind of were just interacting on Twitter, and we were just like, you know what, let's jump on each other's podcasts. So we kind of like
love that.
Swap. Yeah, it's fun.
Well, it is exactly like friends hanging out. If somebody wants to listen, where's the best place to listen and find these podcasts? Where you
can go to comicbooksyndicate.com, but if you are just on Spotify, all of our episodes are on there.
Apple Podcast, anywhere you can find
Stitcher.
Yeah, anywhere you can find podcasts, we're there.
So Here comes the Spidercast. Yep. And then the new one's coming up. The movie one is unnamed, but the superhero one will be called Slam, maybe with a subtitle.
That's
and
right.
then Josh has a
the one that I'm going to be starting up is Trade Rats. So we're going to be looking at like trade paperbacks, so like collections of comics and like famous arcs that we're all kind of like interested or want to revisit. So
I love it. Comicbooksyndicate.com is kind of the home base.
Yep. Everything's there.